going to call home and do that.
If you have a cell phone, please turn it off or silence it before we get started.
I do like that the mayor's phone went off during the city commission meeting.
It's been so many years, I don't know how anyone's
I know.
perfect all this long.
I know.
How's your annual
So even
report
the person
going?
most passionate about something.
Got to finish
Don't know
that.
after tonight.
You have to read the whole thing?
I'm waiting for input from you guys.
I have no doubts you'll put it together well.
Did you get a response? We're going to start.
I have to see it though.
30 seconds.
I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay. I will call to order the Monday, November 25th, 2019 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. First item on the agenda is any public comments on items that are not on our agenda. Are there any? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3A, public hearing. And this is a continuation. The record is still open on this one, so we don't need to reopen the record. It still is.
Yep.
Ms. Robertson-Gardner.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. As you're aware, we are adopting concept planning, zoning, and code amendments for the Beavercreek Road concept plan, and every meeting, seems like, we come back to you with some topics. So we're trying to break up this large package into digestible topics. And the topics we have this evening are the road design, the transportation analysis, and speed zones. And so I will be presenting that in those three topics. And I think what I'd like as planning staff as we get to discussions and direction at the end of the meeting to kind of have those directions in those three different topics. So tonight, once again, we have Beavercreek Road design, which is feedback from the recent City Commission work session and the discussion of how wide Beavercreek Road should be and should there be what the intersection control should be, which is different than the second topic, which is the actual transportation analysis for the rezoning. And John Replinger with Replinger Associates is here this evening and will help walk us through that. And I know you probably have some questions for him, and he hopefully be in a place where he can answer them.
I just want to clarify before we start. Can you tell us how much input you got from the public on each of these? I know you put out some questionnaires and asked.
Oh, sure. Let me do that.
I'd be interested in knowing how much.
Sure, let me do that within each topic.
That's what I was going to ask. Thanks.
That's great. And the last one is speed zone within the concept plan, and that's the direction I received from Chair Mitchell a little bit about speed limits in the concept plan. So I wanted to give an update on some recent Senate bill that passed and what the options are for Oregon City moving forward. So Beavercreek Road design, this is the topic of the discussion about what the design for Beavercreek Road should be and what should be the approach to intersection controls. You know, really at the whole purpose of this concept plan zoning amendment was get a grant, go through some public engagement, take a 60-page narrative document, and work to turn it into clear and objective, implementable code. So as we reached out to the public in the spring of 2019, we heard a lot of comment related to the width of Beavercreek Road and a little bit about intersection control. And so we went back to our consultant, DKS Associates, who was part of the grant package, and asked some questions related to the width of the design and what other options do we have, and does the existing 3-lane segment that was adopted as part of the comprehensive plan and the transportation system plan, does that meet our transportation requirements, and what other options do we have, and what are the kind of pros and cons or trade-offs you would get with the different intersection approaches. And so that's the background I'm going to give now. We realized that this road design definitely had fiscal impacts. So what we did not want to do as staff is run through a very linear process where this all went to the Planning Commission, then it all went to the City Commission, and then there really was no feedback conversation. And so we wanted to reach out to the City Commission early on to try to get their initial comments regarding this design question, to allow the Planning Commission, like we're doing tonight, if the Planning Commission has a different take on this approach or has different insight, then we can build that into the package of recommendations that go to the City Commission, rather than waiting to the very end and realizing the Planning Commission, City Commission may have a different opinion about the approach. Knowing that there is fiscal impact, there is more than just preference of design. I mean, the City Commission, they are going to be balancing factors such as constructability, financing, funding, capital improvement projects, some of those larger questions. So we asked that to them in August, and they kind of gave feedback to staff that they needed more information. So we did some more homework in the fall.
Is it possible for you to turn those lights down?
Sure, we can do that.
Right in the eyes.
Absolutely.
I thought it might help with that screen back there too. That's better.
There we go.
Good
Look
job.
at our eyes.
Right in the eyes.
All right.
Can
So
I ask a quick question too? So when we talk about the government, city involved with the transportation of the cost, so the developers don't pick up any of the costs.
well, this would be the question of and I can get to that when we get through the slides, but it's some of these questions about, yes, there's a point where different approaches would potentially require city being involved in some of the upsides or how it's constructed. So the City Commission asked for us to do a little more homework. We reached out to the community in October and early November and had a survey that asked some different questions about Beavercreek Road design and configuration, as well as intersection controls, and those results are attached, and I'll talk about it in a future slide. And we did some just initial in-house look at sizing of roundabouts. I think sometimes until you actually place a roundabout, both a 3- and 5-lane roundabout on land, the sizing goes from theoretical to actual. And so the roundabout study that's attached really is just taking a federal highway roundabout template and placing it in the center line of the intersection. It was not specially designed at each intersection. If for some reason this community wanted to move forward with roundabouts, there would be a lot more engineering studies related to actually what the final design would be. This is just taking a template and putting it on the center line just for sizing. So we came back so what we learned through that is roundabouts take up more land than signalized intersection, and 5-lane roundabouts definitely take up a lot more land than 3-lane roundabouts. There was a fair amount of neighborhood impact because the west side of the Beavercreek Road is where most of the development has occurred, and there may be quite a fair amount of exactions that would need to be made through condemnation of property in order
Or
to,
will occur? You talking
would
about
occur
existing?
would occur if roundabouts were pursued in the existing alignment of Beavercreek Road. And the process to build, we were finding, because really only the east side of the road was really open for redevelopment. Most of the west side of Beavercreek had been developed, except for a small portion near Claremont and Loader Road, that either the whole center lane of Beavercreek would have to be moved fully east to accommodate the full width of what a 5-lane roundabout would be, or they would have to go through kind of a capital improvement project and go through acquisition of the needed properties in order to put the roundabout in.
That one in Orland Road into Walden is a good example of how much space it takes up.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is the more urbanized an intersection is, the more acquisition potential will need to occur to put a roundabout in. So that's what we were learning, is there was actually a fair amount of existing development we'd have to work around. It wasn't insurmountable, but there were trade-offs. So to make sure we reached out to the public, because this conversation was new of the width of Beavercreek Road and different intersection approaches. And, the goal of this plan was to implement an adopted concept. So when we're bringing in new concepts, we wanted to reach out to the public and touch base and kind of get the pulse of the community. These type of survey results are not statistically significant. We're not asking the public to digest all this information and come up with a specific recommendation. It's really trying to get the pulse of the community and to see where they are at and how that can help provide us an extra data point to decision makers. We heard a lot of comments. If you can think of a comment, we probably heard it from all different sides. And attached in your packet is the breakdown, but then also we provided all the raw data of all the comments. So these are just some selected comments. Tried to find a balance of the comments I received. The breakdown generally was, would you prefer using roundabouts or traffic signals along this section of Beavercreek Road? We had 93 people recommending roundabouts and 79 recommending traffic signals. And those were kind of about the same percentage all the way through the survey, as I would kind of check in every couple days. The next one was talking about lane widths, and would you prefer seeing a 3-lane, 5-lane, or a transition from 5-lane to 3-lane? And that kind of balance of about half of the group, kind of all the way through, wanted a 5-lane, and the other half was some balance of a 3-lane or a transition to a 3-lane. And that also was running pretty standard as a percentage through the open time period of the survey. This was just a general breakdown. We kind of asked trade-off questions, and everyone wanted everything, which is not unique. But it is an interesting piece to see what people were passionate about. And people want both to reduce vehicle congestion and they want pedestrian safety, and we heard that loud and clear. I think those are kind of two big takeaways to get from this non-statistically significant breakdown. The last thing that the City Commission asked, and we actually asked as part of our DKS study this summer, was there was a request to look at the Holly Lane connection projects. And I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about what that means, because I think it's a little vague, so people don't quite understand what Holly Lane connection means. But there are a couple of projects in our transportation system plan, and you'll kind of see them below. D37 and D83 and D57 and D58. And those all kind of together are the Holly Lane connection projects.
Is the yellow the Holly Lane?
That 213 is in yellow. And what you see Holly Lane is, actually, you see where D37 is up at the top?
There.
To
So
the
we don't
left,
see it all.
that road is Holly Lane.
Okay.
So what it's saying is, in order to ensure that not every single user in the Beavercreek Road concept plan or anybody coming to the Beavercreek Road concept plan utilizes that sole intersection at Maple Lane and Beavercreek Road, we need to provide additional opportunities for road connections. Not saying that everyone is going to use those, but it is generally bad transportation policy to have a funneling of only one option down to an intersection. So in an effort to try to find parallel routes and to do trip distribution, which looks at providing different ways for people to reach their destination, so not everyone has to rely on one intersection, these connection projects were identified in the transportation system plan. Our transportation system plan doesn't say when they're built, but they are projects that should be built in order to build out the connectivity in our city. One of the questions that was asked is, can we remove some or all of these? And we had a pretty strong response back from the Oregon Department of Transportation. They indicated that these connectivity projects, these different ways to get people through our city, are the projects identified in our alternate transportation agreement that we had a couple years ago for new targets at 213 in Beavercreek. We went through a big public process and had a working group and approved through Planning Commission, City Commission, mobility targets, or alternative targets at 213 in Beavercreek, with an understanding that there would be some additional safety projects. One of them is the free flow right turn at Beavercreek Road going northbound at 213, right? So right now people are having to yield, so we're trying to get a free flow right, but also all the other projects in our transportation system plan that provide connections throughout the city. So what we heard from ODOT was, if these projects were removed from the transportation system plan, then the city would need to renegotiate our alternative mobility targets, because that was part of the package. And our city commission, we asked the city commission, was this something you would want to pursue? The staff could not, there was no readable project that we could think of that without doing additional engineering work or additional analysis that would replace the existing project. So it wasn't just like take this project and swap it. We would have to go through a full negotiation again and come up with something else that ODOT would agree on. So the city commission directed at this time not to move forward with any renegotiation, to keep these Holly Lane projects in the transportation system plan as adopted, knowing that the whole region is looking at the mobility standards. Some of these conversations will be up again in the next couple of years, and that may be a better time to have these larger conversations. But right now, City Commission gave direction that they did not want to revisit the negotiation for the alternative mobility target.
Can I ask now, so I can completely understand this? So the Oregon state said that if we changed anything, they would not.
So,
is this one of those those things like the county telling us you have to do this or not?
Well, right now we don't meet our mobility targets. So our V over C, our ratio of vehicles at the 213 interchange, because of
Beavercreek.
because of existing background traffic. Everyone is using 213, right? And the standard cannot be met, which we realized as a community we couldn't develop any further. Not just Beavercreek, but we had to understand as a community what would be alternate approaches to also meet the intent. And that was the alternative mobility program that went through public hearings a couple of years ago, where we looked at all of our projects. We looked at maybe safety projects that could help with congestion, but may not necessarily bring it the target down to the level that the rest of the region had. But we had a new target number, and so that number was approved by the Oregon Department of Transportation and the Oregon Highway Division. And that was all through this negotiation of these projects that we proposed. And so if we want to renegotiate that, it would be a brand new process. And
can I just say that one more time, just a little shorter, which is we went through a big community process for years to adopt a transportation system plan. In that plan, more ways to get around is better. We're not all stuck at one pinch point. We had a north-south road. Calling it Holly Lane is a little deceiving of a name, because the road doesn't exist right now. It's not Holly Lane as you think of Holly Lane. It's just north-south connection south of Holly Lane. And so we identified this roadway, adopted the TSP, and then when we adopted the TSP, we had too much congestion on Beavercreek in 213. And as part of us addressing that, we still said, hey, we have alternate routes that people can drive so they don't have to hit the intersection if they don't need to. In general, our city has multiple ways to get around. And so what Christina is saying is this secondary round of negotiations with this alternate mobility target, which is a fancy way of saying we had to figure out another way because it was too busy. So we identified projects to alleviate the congestion and changed how we measured mobility, busyness. That process took us years. And if we took this off, we would have to redo it. And if we redid it, it's hard to imagine an alternative project in which could provide transportation options for the city like this one can. We're running out of room because we're built out, right?
So Laura, my question was, the Oregon Department of Transportation, did they set the targets for us for like the Beavercreek and 213, or is that set by the city?
It's higher than ODOT, actually. It's the Oregon Transportation Commission.
Okay.
So we had to go change it with all these other jurisdictions to accept what we thought was a good option. So this option we chose is something that our community decided in the TSP and then again with alternate mobility targets.
Where I was leading with that is I think I've sat through other meetings with you at commission meetings and others where somebody, the transportation, I'm not sure who it is, but the state doesn't help us with 213. Is that right? That even though we have some problems, they're not willing to help with the finances for it? Am I stating that correctly?
Yeah, it's complicated. 213 is ODOT's right-of-way. They didn't allocate any funding towards fixing it. That came from all of us. And the Beavercreek leg, we have one leg of Beavercreek. The county has another leg of Beavercreek. Nobody gave us money. Nobody was helping us in this. So we had to find a way, and we found a way. And it was a struggle to get there, but we did. And so that's all Christina's saying is this took a long time. It's hard to imagine what an alternative to this would be. But yeah.
Is there no way to force Oregon State's hand on this? Because we all know it's a through highway bringing traffic from outside our city through that area. Is there no way for us to get the state of Oregon to help funding with any of these changes? Have you all tried that? I'm sure you have.
We have. I think a lot of the community members have as well. I understand the feeling that feels like you're kind of backed up against a wall there.
Yeah, they expect us, but they don't want to help us.
Ultimately, the city is the one who has the obligation to meet mobility targets, regardless of who owns that jurisdiction. And that's the real problem. The onus is ours.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, sorry. Thanks for clarifying.
But they're helpful in working through this.
So one more clarification or simplification in my mind is we have the alternate mobility at 213 and Beavercreek, and that's agreed to. And at the time, we had another Holly Lane, a parallel route to get down to the end of the hill, parallel to 213. And I think I understand that the city commission, when asked the question, do we want to open up the alternate mobility at Beavercreek and
Holly
213, is no, we want to stay with that, and we're going to keep Holly Lane on the longer range planning, that is an alternate way to get to the bottom of the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so that's
a slow, dangerous one.
And the road is there, right? It's not like
Slow,
we're
dangerous
taking
one.
away the road.
well, there is, but
It's an
it's the
alternate.
best.
Yeah.
It's the best alternate we have at this time.
Yeah.
And who knows?
I also want to remind, there's a lot of people who also may just need to get to other places southeast of it, but south of Holly Lane, even to Thayer Road or the Maple Lane development area, and don't have to go through, in the long term, and don't have to go through that same intersection. So it's both kind of intra connectivity and then farther out interconnectivity. So I'm going to move on.
Okay.
So we did staff did some very general cost estimates because we wanted to kind of explain to the city commission some of the externalities related to acquisition of land as it relates to different configurations. So this came from the staff memo for the city commission work session, just looking at kind of linear length cost estimates and then putting in potential acquisition of properties, as well as, if it was a small little slope easement or a little backyard, there'd be a little bit of money. But if it was an actual full acquisition of a property, it would be the market value of the property. So trying to build that in. So that's generally what we're seeing as kind of order of magnitude cost estimates of what a full build out of all three of those configurations would be.
How much distance are we talking about here for Beavercreek? I mean, 90
This is
feet wide,
Beavercreek.
but I'm
This
talking
is-
about how far
This
we're
is the
talking.
whole, this is abutting the concept plan boundary. So from about Claremont to the edge of the golf
Is that
course
a
at the
mile
south.
less?
About that, yeah,
But I've got a question.
sure.
Adopted 3-lane is 90 feet wide. Optimal 3-lane is 76. So we've adopted something that's wider than
Yeah,
optimal?
so this was a recommendation of our development services to take a look at what a traditional 3-lane would be. And if you recall, the Beavercreek Road had a center medium, a very large center medium that was for stormwater.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And what we're learning from our engineering team members is that the configuration of the existing road, right, being the opposite. So it's instead of it having peaked at the top and then you're running this way, it would be an invex or convex. And so the geometry to do that, knowing where the existing utilities are in the road and matching up to existing standards would be really, really hard. So they are recommending that whatever the final design of Beavercreek Road is, be it a 3-lane or 5-lane, it will probably need to have the stormwater along the sides of the road in the planter strips. And actually Myers Road connection that the city's working on right now is a good example. They're kind of larger stormwater basins that are in the planter strip area. And you might see a version of that on Beavercreek Road near Fur, and like Nelson's Nautilus, and what's existing on Beavercreek Road. That was a past urban renewal project. And so that may be more alignment of how we'll be working on stormwater for the design section. So if you don't need the large stormwater kind of swale in the middle, you don't necessarily need 90 feet.
So if we put that off to the sides, does this 90 or 76 still allow for a center median of any
Yeah,
sort?
it would be a normal kind of 12-foot center medium.
Okay.
So what the adopted one has a much larger medium than 12 feet. So what they wanted to do just for cost-wise is say 90 feet is actually really large for a 3-lane segment and actually too small for a 5-lane segment. So what they said is, let's do the cost estimate, what a traditional 3-lane and 5-lane segment would be. And so that's where you see the optimal. So an optimal 3-lane would be 76 feet wide, and an optimal 5-lane would be the 100 feet wide.
So if we're talking that area, because that's been, again, one of my big things is if we're going to have an industrial park, we're going to have homes, plus all the people coming in Beavercreek. If we did a 5-lane for a mile, you're saying it would cost around $34 million, but I wonder if that cost in the long run wouldn't be worth it instead of doing small and then figuring out like they did on Sunnyside that, oh, we need to expand this in this area because of all the traffic. I mean, has there been some thought given to that kind of a concept that let's not squeeze it, let's give it as much as it can?
So one of the big things that staff identified as part of this was either you look, and this was the questions we asked, is do you look at developing incrementally over time, or do you look at more of a development phase? And so then you really only are getting the east side of the road. So it's going to be much harder to do a 5-lane segment. Or do you look at a capital improvement project? So you kind of take money in and do it all together. And the direction we received, and I have another slide on this, received from the city commission was they wanted to look at funding opportunities for capital improvement project. They weren't decided either way. They wanted to learn more. So we're going to come back at a future meeting to talk about what that means. But they did recommend going to 5 lanes to Myers Road, which was the kind of large transportation intersection between the Myers Road extension, which goes to 213, the high school, and into the development. As you go farther south, there is definitely a drop off of traffic, and that's the direction we received from the city commission at the November work session. So if the planning commission, through deliberations, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but through this deliberation process, wants to recommend an alternate approach, we'll want to provide findings for staff to forward that through to the city commission.
It would seem to me that nobody wants to spend that kind of money. We don't have that kind of money right now, but that kind of money now is going to be a lot more money later if we do it incrementally, just in little steps. It's going to cost more and more over time, but that's a good analysis, good study. Thank you.
So, so these were the questions we asked to the city commission. This is their initial direction to us. How many lanes should Beavercreek Road be within the corridor? Should be a transition from 5 lane to 3 lanes at Myers Road. So after Myers Road, it would go to 3 lanes. What type of intersection should Beavercreek Road have within the concept plan corridor? Traffic signals. Should the city renegotiate with ODOT for the ultra-mobility standard to remove Holly Lane for the TSP? No. And should Beavercreek Road along the concept plan corridor be constructed by developers incrementally as a development is built, or pursued as a capital improvement project all at once? And they said the city should investigate if a city-led capital improvement project is feasible, and we're going to be coming back to them at a future meeting to talk about funding opportunities. And they'll provide further direction at that time to us. Though I kind of see it as 2 parallel pieces for the concept plan zoning and code amendments. The important part is trying to find what the final cross-section is. So how it's built can be on a parallel path, and the adopted cross-section is important because that needs to be readopted if it's different than the 3 lane. Because we'll need to, if any development comes in, we need to know what the final road design is to be able to determine if there's fee in lieu. Even if it's a capital improvement project, we might be able to get fee in lieu based on an adopted street design.
And what's in the adopted plan is
3
3
lanes.
lane with a 90-foot right of way.
Correct.
Okay. And a 5 lane would be 100-foot right.
That's what we're recommending as staff.
Okay.
It's my understanding the developers don't need to pick up the cost of the whole road, just the side that they're developing on. Is that what I gathered from what you said?
So you're required to always build half street plus 10, and right now it's a city policy to provide system development fee credits for anything above a local street.
So system development charges are different than system development credits?
So you'd be getting credits for building above a local street.
Above would mean if they expanded to 2 on that side.
Correct. So anything other than above a local street standard.
Do system development charges, I know that, are they put into transportation items too? Or are they just mainly for
No, you pay
electrical
system
and
development fees based on
utilities?
different categories. So there'll be
This
a
is
parks.
a different category.
So there'll be a parks STC fee, a transportation, a pet and bike, different utilities, sewer, water, storm. So
Each one is
when you
different.
build, you have system development fees in different categories, and those stay in their categories and can only be spent for the category.
Thank
You have
you.
more in your,
Yes.
okay. You do.
So that is my initial kind of background on what we talked about related to the Beavercreek Road design. Next, I'd like to have John Replinger with Replinger Associates walk the Planning Commission through the transportation analysis. As you recall, this is a zone change, so there is transportation requirements for zone changes. And so that was done, called the transportation analysis, was done by our consultant team in June. So there's a memo done by DKS, and John is going to walk you through that.
And just to clarify, the setup here is the city had an outside consultant, DKS, do the study. That study is being reviewed by the city's other transportation consultant who reviews all development applications, who's John Replinger. So,
And quick question. So the county doesn't help us at all with this transportation because once it gets to the city limits, we're responsible, the county, because that road does go further out, doesn't help us with any of this,
Well, they can provide comment as
but they
part of our
can't
land
provide
use.
funding.
That would be an intergovernmental agreement.
They
Oh.
do own some of the roadway within our city limits
I
that
was
we
just
process land use applications on, but they're ultimately responsible for the roadway design.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, John Replinger, and you've seen me here a few times before on all kinds of development review activities over the years. And as you're aware, we require the applicant, which in this case is the city, to prepare a traffic impact study, transportation analysis for plan amendment and zone change, and for specific development activities, including individual buildings and subdivisions. So this is, directly parallel to that we require require of all developers. When we have a transportation analysis for zone changes and plan amendments, the applicant is required to address the long-term impacts to show compliance with the transportation planning rule, which is state law. Oregon Administrative Rules, Part 660, 12-006. So anyway, so the focus is on long-range impacts. When we do an analysis of a specific development plan, specifically when it is an allowed use, the long-range analysis has already been done as part of the TSP. So in that case, the focus is on the short term, when the subdivision is going to be built out, when the building is going to be occupied. So again, that's a distinction that you'll see depending upon the type of application that comes forward.
What do you consider long range?
About 20 years.
Okay.
It matches the planning horizon year of the transportation system plan. So, as Christina and Laura indicated, there was the applicant, which in this case the city, hired DKS to perform the transportation analysis to show the impact of the Beavercreek concept plan. We had undertaken back in 2008, a different consultant prepared a study showing the impacts and addressed that. We also paid some attention to it in terms of the development of the transportation system plan, but because of some differences and I would say an abundance of caution to make sure we were going through the process clearly and correctly, we had DKS, the city, I shouldn't be using the term we there, but the city, the applicant, had DKS do an analysis. And just as with any other application, I reviewed it from the city staff perspective to make sure that everything was done appropriately, kind of a second look to address this. The focus of this analysis, and it's the same thing that we would do when a developer comes in for a zone change. Maybe it's an industrial and they're proposing to analyze to put in a retail establishment. The focus is on the difference between what's allowed and what is permitted under the proposed change. In this case, our focus of the DKS analysis was what was assumed in the transportation system plan when that was adopted in 2013, and what is proposed in terms of the Beavercreek concept plan. The difference is about 750 more housing units than were anticipated and about 4,000 additional jobs in the area. So those are the numbers. It'd be the same thing if we were looking at an industrial parcel of 5 acres that anticipated, 50 employees and a retail establishment with an office building that had 300 employees, we'd be looking at the difference. Exactly parallel in terms of our approach. The conclusion of the DKS analysis was that the transportation system plan and its projects specified in the adopted plan would provide adequate capacity to meet the mobility standards in the corridor and in the specific study area intersections. And they looked at the appropriate intersections along the Beavercreek Road corridor and some of the adjoining and nearby intersections. So the numbers are big, 750 housing units and 4,000 jobs. But when putting running it through all the calculations and accounting for the fact that it's a big area and a lot of dispersed origins and destinations for trips, the analysis showed that each of the study area intersections would meet the mobility standards specified in the TSP. Now, also, they did assume that all the projects that were included in the likely to be funded list were in place. And again, the focus of this was on the planning horizon for the TSP. They did not do any short-term analysis to determine, for example, whether or not a particular intersection, would Beavercreek and Loader be overloaded in its existing configuration? That was not done. When a developer comes in and seeks to put in a project that will impact that intersection or whatever intersection, they will have to analyze that, and we'll be back before you with transportation analysis and my critique of that. So the Beavercreek concept plan can be accommodated with the TSP projects. It's also worth noting that as Christina just described, the discussion is underway about what the configuration of Beavercreek Road would be, consideration of 5 lanes rather than 3, and DKS's assumption is what was in the adopted plan. So that is the far north end of it is 5 lanes, but coming further south, it's 3 lanes. They assume 3 lanes, but we can be assured that if you end up building 5 lanes through some of those key intersections, it will also meet mobility standards. So it's not a concern there. The DKS study was reviewed by ODOT, as they do with all of the typical zone change and comprehensive plan amendments that affect highways. And I, as the city's transportation consultant for development review purposes, also reviewed it, just as I do when there's any other development application comes through. The conclusion is there's all done adequately by DKS, and there are no constraints in terms of or any need for conditions of approval requiring the developer to do anything additional beyond what was listed in the TSP. Again, when any development comes in within the concept plan area, they will be required to do a transportation impact analysis, just like you see on a monthly basis. It has to conform with the guidelines for traffic impact analyses that are part of the city code, and we'll be seeing those projects coming forward. We will be adopting conditions of approval for some of those, and each of those developments will be paying into the system's development charges and being required to implement various transportation projects as part of their conditions of approval for the development.
I'm a little confused. So the TSP was prepared in 2013.
Yes.
And they had enough foresight to plan out for this Beavercreek concept plan so that we don't need to change that? From what you said, we're planning on 750 homes and 4,000, a little over, employees.
Right.
And was that already in when they were discussing the transportation system plan, that they knew that that was coming and what they expected?
Not specifically. They didn't anticipate quite that many. When we prepared the TSP, we didn't anticipate quite as much development as is now contemplated in the Beavercreek concept plan area. I guess the analogy I would give you is in terms of postage and mailing a letter. You know, you've got the envelope and 8 sheets of paper, and you've got to put on 2 stamps. Well, the fact of the matter is, you can probably put 10 or 11 sheets of paper in there. So, I mean, I think we were kind of fortunate, and capacity comes in chunks. You know, you add a lane, you get a lot more capacity. You add a left turn lane at a traffic signal, you get a lot more capacity. So I think part of the reason for going through the analysis was to make sure that we had adequate capacity, and had we identified something that needed to be changed, that would be a condition of approval, and it's conceivable that we could have come back and said that we need to add a couple more projects to the TSP. It turns out the analysis showed that we do not need to do that. I mean, part of that is that our 2008 study had given us a good idea what to expect. We solidified it and included it in the plan, and once again, we've proven.
Before you forget it, though, the second part of my question was, you said each development's going to have to come in and get approval for their section of the road. Did I gather that from you?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't make that quite clear. A development that comes in will have to do a traffic study, and to a certain extent, those people will be required to build some of the roads, whether it's a section of Loader or a section of Myers Road or Holly Lane, and those that abut Beavercreek Road will have to do frontage.
And that's where my question came in, was if we know that it can handle that under the TSP and under your studies, why would they have to go through and prove again that their analysis? I mean, if it's already, we've shown that this is what it's going to be, do you expect that a development might change what you have planned?
We're probably not going to see very much change. And the focus of most of the development reviews and the traffic impact studies performed by developers is not on the big system, but rather on whether the left turn lane needs to go in now, or whether what the appropriate configuration and the specific, intersection configuration is going to have to be for right now. Can they get away with a stop sign? Can the implementation of a traffic signal, is that required now, or will that be a few years down the road yet?
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
I have one quick one.
Sure.
Speaking of capacity, signals versus roundabouts, does either one of them have any appreciable benefit over the other?
That's there are no clear answers.
I wasn't sure.
There are advantages and disadvantages of each.
But that being a safety corridor, I would think that would make a difference from what the residents said.
It can make a difference, and part of the difficulty is in terms of safety for whom. There are lots of there are concerns about particularly about pedestrians in terms of roundabouts, and especially when you get to really big roundabouts. And there's lots. I don't think we've got the results in yet.
All right. Any questions?
I'll follow up on your last statement towards the end there of pedestrian traffic. at Myers Road, where the high school is at, I've heard comments that there's going to be a lot of students or people crossing that intersection to get into the industrial area. And putting a roundabout at that spot seemed like it would be a hindrance to the foot traffic. Foot traffic does better at a standard signalized intersection.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people who would agree with you on that. Some of the research indicates that motorists are quite good about yielding to pedestrians when the motorists, are entering a roundabout.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not so good about yielding as they're exiting a roundabout. So it's a conundrum.
And how far is the crosswalk for pedestrians after you exit at any one of the four legs? Is it a distance that the driver thinks, whoa, I survived, I got through this roundabout, and about the time they start feeling comfortable, here's a crosswalk, and they're short time, or they have a time to say,
Well,
they may forget about it. They think, hey, we got it through.
Yeah, the crosswalks do tend to be located a fair distance from the outside circulating
okay.
roadway. So
it would be a painted crosswalk. It wouldn't.
there are lots of different.
There's versions of crosswalks that
lots of different versions.
catch us all.
Could be painted. There could be some raised crosswalks. There could be different, different colors.
One that shows people running.
Yeah. And there have been some experiments with crossing beacons to alert people. I mean, and then there are issues about compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Sure.
How do you compensate? How do you account for, blind or wheelchair users at crosswalk? So it's
and then bicyclists get a new method. They don't cross on the crosswalks.
Bicyclists have a choice.
They have a choice.
They have a
Okay.
choice. Bicyclists can remain in the circulating roadway just as they would with as a motor vehicle driver, or many bicyclists will end up choosing to use the pedestrian path and use the crosswalk at a different location. And a lot of it can depend upon whether it's a two-lane or a single lane of roundabout or a two-lane roundabout. That's why, as Christina explained about the initial analysis on Beavercreek Road, was to set a standard template down over the road. But I think she identified that each one has to be custom designed, taking into consideration, the property and the approach volumes and all kinds of issues.
Probably one last question on that. Do we have safety data on mixing automobiles and bicycles on a one-ring roundabout or a two-ring? Do the bicyclists win every time, or do the cars win every time, or what is the crash or incident level?
I'm not familiar. I'm sure that there have been some research studies, but I'm not familiar with any of the results.
They're safer.
Two questions.
Yes.
You mentioned likely to be funded list
Yes.
in the TSP. Is the Hoggley Lane extension on the likely to be funded list?
I think it is. Do you know?
I believe so. We can double check while
Okay.
we have public comment.
Okay. Second thing, and this is, I know you're an engineer and you're probably not going to like my question, but in terms of moving cars, if the two-lane section that is there now is a 1 and a 5-lane section is a 10, what's a 3-lane section?
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble understanding
Well, okay.
your question.
We have a 2-lane section now.
Yes.
If money was no concern, we would probably all want to see a full 5-lane section
And he's rated at 1 to 10.
with it, and that'd be state of the art.
Well-
That'd be a 10. If what I'm trying to get at is is a 3-lane section just a little bit of an improvement over the 2 that we have, or is it pretty darn close to a 5
Well-
in terms of how much traffic it'll handle, or is it?
It's a tricky question. So it depends in part on how many turning movements there are. The place where a 3-lane section really shines and is a vast improvement over a 2-lane section is when you have left-turning vehicles.
Okay.
So if you can take the left, I mean, we've all been on a 2-lane road where we're stuck behind somebody making the left turn. You get all this oncoming traffic and, you know, somebody behind us decides, well, I'm driving the ditch, you know, to get around.
Yeah. Or the bike lane.
Holcomb
Yeah.
Boulevard.
Or, you know, driving the bike lane or driving the parking lane or, you know, whatever. So if there are substantial number of left turn lanes, and one of the things you may watch for next time you see one of the development review applications come forward is that we often have the applicant's engineer analyze where the left turn lane is needed. So depending upon the volume that's coming toward you and the volume that's behind you, you may justify the left turn lane. When you have enough intersections, you say, well, everybody needs a left turn lane at every intersection, so that's how we come up with the 3-lane section. Now, if nobody is making left turns because there's no access, we don't need a 3-lane section. We look at a 2-lane section or a 4-lane section. So, once again, it's a unique situation based upon the circumstances that we're trying to evaluate.
So between a 3-lane and a 5-lane, is it
Yes.
twice as many cars?
Probably in that number. Yes.
Okay.
But it goes back to my post office analogy. You know, if you got, you know, hey, if you got 8 sheets of paper, it's going to take 2 stamps. I mean, you don't need to put on 3 stamps. That doesn't get you any better service.
Good analogy. I like
Okay.
that.
Question for...
It's nice that, you know, I have people who know what stamps are. To relate, you know.
Some of us older folks do. Did I not hear in a city commission meeting that Frank or one of the other commissioners had been suggesting, even though I know that Holly Lane is on the mobility, did they not suggest that we kind of leave that out of the picture for the time being? Did I hear something?
I heard clear direction from the city commission that was not something they wanted to pursue.
That the Holly
There
Lane
was a
one.
consensus for direction.
But it's in our mobility as a possibility. Is that what I heard tonight?
The whole region is looking at mobility standards in a couple of years, so we can have that conversation again when the whole region wants
I
to.
thought I'd heard something
Yeah.
about it, but they're not looking at it. Okay, thanks.
But I can't tell you the date or time that's going to happen.
That takes 4 stamps.
One thing real quick, I'd like to, in this conversation about the difference between the traffic numbers of the 750 homes and the 4,000 and change, you recall in 2013, the Beavercreek Road concept plan was in legal review. So it wasn't so we were a little hesitant to put those numbers in to our transportation system plan. In 2016, it was readopted and the 5,000 jobs and the 1,000 something homes were added into the regional model. So by the time DKS was looking at the transportation analysis, they have already been added into the regional model. And we were in 2013 still thinking about them in regards to the projects that were on the list, but those numbers weren't added into the 2013 transportation system plan. So we were thinking about it, but they weren't added in because the plan was in legal review.
Any other questions for Mr. Replinger?
One thing I wanted to touch base on. We talk about capacity a lot, but one thing we're not talking about a lot is like the difference from a 2-lane to a 3-lane or from a 4-lane to a 5-lane is if you have like a 4-lane, the left lane is kind of the passing lane, and then someone stops to make a left turn. I drive up 213 every day. There's a huge safety improvement by putting in that turning lane.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the worst accidents I've seen were on 213 where people stop to turn into a driveway and people are doing 55, and all of a sudden that car is not supposed to be stopped. And, there's been some brutal ones. Barnard's Road, I think Maxburg's got one. I haven't seen a bad accident really since they've done that. So, capacity is one thing, but also safety. I think a 4-lane is a really bad idea just because the left lane ends up, people have to stop in the left lane. That just sounds like
and in fact, idea. I think you've probably seen in Portland has done a lot of conversion
right.
from 4-lane to 3-lane.
Well, all happened, we got it too.
And
it's better.
Yeah.
Because the left lane doesn't stop. It's just a bad idea.
I don't think a 4-lane is under consideration.
Okay, but the 3-lane would have a significant safety improvement, even if that's all we could afford?
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot.
Go ahead.
For John or Christina, I don't know which, I've heard that there will be no driveways or left turns other than the major intersections along Beaver Creek.
That's the concept. I mean, in terms of we have a hierarchy of roadways with the, expressways and with 213 being an example of that, between 205 and Beavercreek Road. And we've got the one traffic signal, but, we really limit the number of access points. We do so also we try to do that, protect the arterial roads. And when there's a choice, a corner lot, you have access is onto the minor street as the general rule. It's the same thing that we were just talking about, those left turns into the site driveway that really reduce the capacity, they increase the friction, they slow things down, and the stop and go sequence as people are then trying to sort themselves out, get the higher accident rate and you get less capacity.
Yeah.
So
now if you take a right, then you could use the roundabout so you can come back.
Yep.
Some other way to go, or you have to go around the block.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
One other question I had, sorry.
That's okay.
If we're having an industrial park in there, can one presume that we're not going to have a lot of little entrances, that we're probably, like a Tektronix, going to have one major one, that it would go off little side streets?
I think we have, again, we would try to focus the access onto the minor street, the lower classification street. And yes, we work very diligently at keeping the access to a minimum. And we can be persuaded that a second access or an access onto a higher classification roadway may prove to be, on a system-wide basis, the preferable approach. But it's the burden is on the applicant to prove that and satisfy us as to the
so an applicant would, it's the city, as you just said, but I mean the development of those different properties out. That's, what I'm asking is rather than a lot of little small ones, there'd be something going in where
there may. I want to bring two things in. We do have minimum block sizes. So there are, what you see on these Beavercreek Road plans are the major streets, but there'll be minor streets within our block pattern.
On the Beaver Creek?
Inside the Beavercreek Road development. So there's smaller local roads that you're not seeing because it's just our block standard. So we would want access. I think, a right in, right out, maybe on Beavercreek Road, if it makes sense and they can make their case. Once again, that's not having left turns southbound. So I think it really is a case-by-case basis. Does it make sense? Does it help the system? And I think our preference is when we can to restrict access, but maybe in a certain specific, there might be a driveway where it makes sense to allow ride-outs because it relieves, a pressure point at, another intersection within the area. So that's what a kind of the local transportation site plan and design looks at, which is what's the actual configuration of the parking lot and the building, and like, are there good site distances, and if a right in, right out is allowed on Beaver Creek, does it help the system? Is it located in the right place if allowed, things like that.
The reason behind my question is, I know Dirk's about the roundabouts, but if you're having a lot of employees, 4,000 some come in there, it would make sense to have something where that they go in one area and divide out from there, and because there are going to be a lot of people coming up 213 from someplace else, and then having a light there would mean that they'd have, what's the word I'm looking for? Their light is for them to turn left to hold up the other traffic rather than trying to go in between.
Right, so there's multiple ways to get in and get out.
Dedicated light is the one I was looking for.
So there'll be, signals at the main intersections to get in, and there'll be a local street network and block system in. And if they can prove safety, maybe a right in, right out at potential driveways. But once again, that wouldn't allow a southbound. So left turn on Beaver Creek, because it would be right in, right out.
Of course you do. Go ahead.
We've got a question on the industrial park. It's kind of a clarification of I don't need to know what's going to be going on in an industrial park, but is it a light industrial or campus? And my focus is, what type of trucks, large trucks primarily, might be going into that site? And there I would think you would want your roundabout, if you're going to have a roundabout, to access large
for a major road like Beaver Creek, the assumption is going to be that you have to design for the big semi-trailer trucks to be able to navigate that. I think we can anticipate that even grocery stores have their materials, their supplies delivered by
delivery and pickups and stuff from an
roundabouts do need to be designed to accommodate the appropriate vehicle. Now we're lucky in terms of grocery stores because the deliveries can be done at off-peak times, and it may be quite acceptable for them to occupy all the lanes in the roundabout, or even to have their vehicles go over the mountable median in the center so that they can make it through. But if they're doing that at 2 o'clock in the morning, or even 7 o'clock in the morning, it may be quite acceptable. Designing really big roundabouts, again, it's a unique situation that needs to be accounted for by the characteristics of the vehicles and the volumes and the like.
A 3-lane or a 5-lane roundabout, is there a big consideration for these trucks, the bigger trucks? Can the bigger trucks navigate the 3-lane as well as the 5-lane?
Yes.
No, they all flip.
They can be designed to accommodate.
It's a doomsday device.
Anything else from Mr. Replinger?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have more presentations?
I have 3 more slides. And then
3 more slides, okay.
Yeah.
3 more slides.
So speed zones within the concept plan. There has been a new Senate Bill 558, which was adopted this summer. And basically it allows cities statewide to be able to do what Portland can do right now by state statute. So this Senate Bill 558 allows cities and counties the authority to establish by ordinance a designated speed for rights-of-way under their jurisdiction, rather than having to go through the state to have a design speed study. You can have a speed 5 miles lower than the statutory speed, so local streets can be 20 miles per hour instead of 25. If they're located in a residential district, so that could be a local street or a collector, and not an arterial street. And they provide appropriate signage for the designated speed. So that was signed in by the governor this summer, and it goes into effect January 1st, 2020. So if the Planning Commission wishes to pursue a lower local street standard in the residential areas of the Beavercreek Road concept plan. This could be a good test case, but the recommendation would need to come from the Planning Commission to the City Commission. If they concur, they can probably write into it through ordinance that once a development happens, that each development goes in can have the 20-mile-an-hour speed zone. If that's something that this community wanted. And one slide I thought was really interesting, kind of talking about pedestrian safety related to speeds. And really the difference in those 5 miles per hour actually does quite a lot. And even, so you are much more likely to survive a pedestrian car accident if the car is going 20 miles per hour. Even getting up to 30, you can see your ability to survive that accident dramatically decreases. And so having local streets at a lower mile per hour does provide pedestrian benefits if the community wants it. So one nice...
Local being inside?
Local streets. So this is not
itself.
Beavercreek Road. This is local streets. And so this would be something that would be chosen by the Planning Commission, City Commission, as a test case for the city. So this can happen citywide, but what I've heard from our City Commission, and they want to make sure that this is something the community wants.
20 miles an hour happens to be the approximate speed inside a roundabout.
I think he's done it.
Sensing a theme here.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
So question.
He's all
Yeah.
about the roundabouts. Going
It
back-
only allows, I'm all for 20 miles an hour. I'll state that right up front. But the way the state law is written, it would only be in the residential zones of the concept plan area and couldn't
just-
apply to the whole concept plan area?
Only residential sections of the concept plan get this Senate bill ability. So if you want to do something outside the Senate bill, you have to do speed studies. What they're saying
You do a
is...
speed study when it hasn't been built.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot more complicated
Stand it
to do it. Though, no, I'm going to say the commercial main streets, such as Glen Oak Main Street, that little neighborhood node, state statute allows that to be 20 miles an hour today. So what really has been added is residential streets that are not arterial streets, statewide now. If cities want to, and it's under their jurisdiction, they can change the speed limit basically without having to do a speed study.
Okay.
It's an easier procedure.
So
to get it.
I want to clarify that too. So like Redland Road is 40, that's like a Beaver Creek.
That's not a local street. That's
No,
an
I'm
arterial.
just saying,
Yeah.
but I'm just for speed.
Mhm.
Beaver Creek is right now 40, I think. Unless you get by the high school, I'm not sure.
That sounds about right.
But if you get into where it's more residential, it probably slows down, like downtown. I know some people do 30, some do 20.
And we're moving to 20 miles an hour in Kenema, correct?
That is a first test case, correct. And that is related to the McLaughlin-Kenema Trail, and that was supported by the residents of McLaughlin.
Where I was going with that, what
Sure.
determines if something's an arterial?
Oh, it's a classification in our transportation system plan.
So like what's Holcomb Boulevard?
That's an arterial.
Arterial. And arterials,
Are not subject, they in order to have a reduced speed, you have to do a speed study, and that's actually happening in Holcomb right now. And Dana
I
Webb,
know.
our city engineer, is working on
should be
that.
going up, not down.
And there is discussion about, well, different opinion. There is a much different process. This is basically saying we're going to take away the red tape involved in reducing residential streets from 25 to 20. Just acknowledging that residential streets are not arterials. They're not providing anything more than local street traffic. Maybe even collector, but collector of a residential street's not that much higher.
There's the rub. What's the difference between a collector and an arterial?
Sure, and a collector is really, a residential collector street would have maybe a little bit bigger, more transportation trips onto it, but it's still at a residential standard. So it's just slightly more than a local street, but it's not an arterial. It's not a much bigger. You're just kind of collecting a couple of local streets
From
together.
off the residential
But the
area.
level, the level is still so much smaller than you would have in a citywide arterial street where lots of different roads are coming in.
So who determines, like I'm looking at Beaver Creek up there and the speed that people come down to go to 213 versus, again, I brought up Redland or Holcomb. What determines those speeds? Is the county,
No, that's by the state.
the state controls it? Like Holly Lane right now, it's
Correct.
slow because of its,
Correct.
how curved
Yeah,
it
so
is.
you would have to turn in a speed study and make
And
your,
that speed study, there's where I'm going. Is it based on somebody standing out there?
yeah, you
or
do
some-
an analysis of what the average speed is. So a good example is just because you change the speed on your speed sign doesn't mean people are necessarily going to slow down if the street is not designed for people to slow down. So usually reducing speed is usually in combination of doing more urbanized street improvements. So sidewalks, sometimes parking, providing not having so much, built asphalt that you feel like you're in that runway where the wider the road feels, the faster you drive. The wider your lane widths are. So if you drive with a 12 or 14 wide lane, which would be something that you're like on a highway or McLaughlin Boulevard, you're going to drive much faster than you're in a 10-foot wide lane.
Right.
So just even the width of the lanes can affect your speed and how comfortable you are. So what they're saying is you need to prove that people are meeting that average speed. And so there's targets in a speed study. And if you don't, what are improvements you can make to the road to reduce that feeling that you can drive faster?
Because the reason I was asking, because I was thinking, would you be doing a survey with people along Beaver Creek out that way where it breaks off to residential? I know in Park Place on Holcomb, they did a survey, but hardly anybody responded to it. So how do you know what's...
Well, that's not the speed survey. That was just a resident's opinion survey.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's a
that's why I was asking if you
Yeah.
were doing a survey for Beaver Creek.
Well, see, Beaver
up
Creek's
there.
not part of Senate Bill 558. So this is just the internal residential streets.
Okay, within, once they get off Beaver
Yeah,
Creek down
yeah.
into the side of it,
Yeah.
okay.
So this would be if the Planning Commission and City Commission wants to, the residential streets within the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan could basically at opening day be 20 miles an hour.
Okay, thank you.
Would that be
Clarification.
citywide or would it
No,
be pick
it
and
would
drop?
Within
be
the concept plan.
within the concept plan.
Okay, but everything in the concept plan? Sorry.
Residential streets within the concept
Residential.
plan.
We wouldn't call one thing and call.
No, we would probably say residential streets within the concept
Okay,
plan.
right.
Industrial included in residential.
Industrial is out
It's
of it.
not a residential street.
And what type of
part of
speed
that
limit
area.
would we normally expect to have in a?
I can take a look at
industrial?
what those are.
It would be
I don't
confusing
know
if
them
you
offhand.
Probably not 40. is it?
25 to 30.
It's 25, 30,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so it sounds like an easy way to get your speed down in the neighborhood instead of doing lots of studies. You just state Senate Bill 558 allows me to do this, you do it.
In some ways,
But is
it's a
that-
nice
But is
test
that what the
case.
neighborhood wants?
What?
I mean, we can say that, but is that what the residential
Well,
wants?
there's no neighborhood now.
If the city wants it, I think.
Concept.
Well, this is a unique opportunity because there are no residents right now.
Right, right.
They're buying into the concept of a 20 mile an hour street when they move in,
They don't
Just
have a
way to go
choice.
off
Too much
Okay,
of a
let's, one at a
choice.
time, guys, please.
Sorry.
inside the concept plan area. So people
Okay.
are buying new homes and renting apartments or buying into the concept of a 20 mile an hour street.
Right. Okay.
All right, so that is what I have. So I know we have lots of public comment tonight, and as we move to the end and we look for Planning Commission direction, if you have any, and additional questions for staff, not everything I might be able to answer this evening, so I might have to, come back to you at a future meeting. I'd like the conversation to be helpful to me as we talk about it in these three categories. But I'm available for conversation after public comment.
Just want to say thank you. This was pretty clear.
Oh, good.
Brought lots of questions, but it was really
Okay,
clear.
I have two public comment cards, and I'm going to assume, Mr. Mobley, that your comment is more along the lines of additional information for us. So I'm going to call on you first because it's kind of part of the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening,
Yes, you got
Commissioners.
one piece up
I'm
here.
Todd Mobley with Lancaster Engineering. We're at 321 Southwest 4th Avenue, Suite 400 in Portland, 97204. So I'm a traffic engineer with Lancaster Engineering, so I apologize for beating you guys up with 2 traffic engineers in one night. But all the questions and Christina's input too have really, and John's presentation kind of set the stage here for what I wanted to talk about, which is a real narrow piece of that. So we've been looking at the concept plan area, and basically I wanted to talk a little bit about the street system that's part of the current proposal for the plan area. And it's mostly the collector street network. So on the first page of this memo, and I apologize, I don't have it on the screen, I took an excerpt out of the transportation system plan that shows that hierarchy of street classifications from freeway, expressway, major arterial, minor arterial, down to collectors and local streets. So streets like Beavercreek is a major arterial, Myers is a minor arterial, and outside of Myers, all the streets in the plan area shown there would be collectors. So that just sort of sets it up here, but moving on to the planned density in the concept plan area. We talked about that already this evening too, so I won't start from scratch, but there's industrial and employment uses at the north end, some small scale commercial and mixed use kind of along the Beavercreek corridor as you go south. And then on the southeast portion is planned for R5, which is a single family detached residential uses. So generally, as you go south through the plan area, some of those trip intensities from those land uses decrease, and that combined with most of the travel patterns being to and from the north. Some of those streets, especially as you get to the southern end of the plan area, will have lower volumes the farther you go south. And what sort of exacerbates that is where the planned intersection improvements on Beavercreek. So we talked about not allowing left turns at minor intersections along Beavercreek. Those left turns need to happen at larger intersections that have either a roundabout or a traffic signal. And in the current plan, Glen Oak is the farthest south that would have that kind of intersection control. So everything south of Glen Oak would be limited to right in, right out movements. And that includes that farthest south collector that's shown that connects to Beavercreek right at the edge of the plan area. That would be limited to right turns in and right turns out. If you're coming southbound on Beavercreek Road, you wouldn't be able to make a left turn in there. So you'd have to make your left turn at Glen Oak and then come down through the internal streets.
I'm confused. If you're coming off 213 and you're coming up Beavercreek, you can't turn left into the area?
If you're coming down Beavercreek, like from the high school, say.
Coming from Beavercreek off 213, you're coming to go to work, you come up 213, go on Beavercreek, and I'm hearing right turn, and I keep thinking, these people are coming up.
We're looking at just adjacent to the plan area, so we're south of 213.
Yes, way down there. But I just kept hearing tonight right turns, and I kept thinking, how does someone come off 213 to come in to go to work there if they can't turn left anywhere?
Well, they could turn off of 213 and make a left, but once they're coming down Beavercreek, you could turn left at Claremont, you could turn left at Loader, or
so there is left turn lanes.
Myers, and then Glen Oak. But as you get beyond Glen Oak, if you're going farther south, then you wouldn't have that opportunity anymore. So,
can I ask one other question? Because I'm a little confused.
Sure.
I know who our first gentleman was, John, but are you representing the city or representing the planning of this area? That I'm not sure.
I'm not representing the city. We do Lancaster. I'm the owner of Lancaster Engineering. We do a lot of work on the applicant side.
The applicant side being the city right now, not the developers?
Well, for development work.
Okay, I was just confused where with this conversation.
The city hired him to do this study. We reviewed the study. John Ripplinger reviewed the study.
Okay, I just didn't.
There's no he's not,
Just providing comment.
Input.
Transmission engineer.
I didn't know, so I thought I'd better ask. I thought maybe we were at the development stage already. Thanks.
No,
there's no development that's happening.
This is ahead of that. So But what we're seeing kind of in anticipation of future development is this issue with the spacing of those collector streets. So that's why I wanted, as we move from concept plan to implementation, that's why I wanted to share this at this stage in the process. So we've been coordinating with city staff at the right time to share that. So,
Okay, thanks.
so anyway, to move through this quickly, then that inability to make that left turn movement further decreases those volumes on the southern streets in the plan area. So what we're seeing is, and also just sort of the shape of the plan area. At the north, it's wider. The collectors are spaced farther apart, but as you move south, it sort of funnels in. That big notch to the east side of the plan area is kind of off the side of the canyon. It's open space planned for parks and it's not developable. So the geography of the plan area kind of funnels down towards the south end, but the road system follows, which is logical. That's fine. Makes sense. But as they kind of get closer together, that combined with a decrease in residential density, a lot of those streets at the south end, we think, are not going to have that much traffic. They're going to be, to steal John's analogy, these are one stamp streets, not two. So that's what we wanted to raise that. I don't have a specific proposal for you tonight other than to kind of raise that issue, talk about it a little bit, and maybe ask for, as the plan gets adopted, some flexibility in the way those streets can be constructed. Just kind of to Christina's point about speeds, we wouldn't want to over-design those streets because they're all residential in character, especially at South End. And we want them to be sized appropriately so they're not too big, speeds aren't too high, make sure we can maintain neighborhood livability.
Here was my question that, because I thought South End is the residential area.
Right.
And I thought, so if somebody wants to go home and they're coming from Albertsons, they can't turn left into the residential. They'd have to turn in further up, like industrial or that way, to go down, all the way down to their residence. Unless they go all the way down someplace else, turn around, come back to turn in right into their residential area. You follow what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah.
And I was thinking, because if that's residential, how are some of those people who go shopping and all that going to get back to their homes, except winding their way through some of those areas that are supposedly going to be some downtown areas with storefronts down below and residents up above. They're going to have to go through all that just to get back down to their homes on the south end.
Some of them would, and there's two kind of north-south collectors, so that could share the traffic load. And I think all that's appropriate. I'm not disagreeing with any of the findings of the concept plan or the network. We just think as you get farther south, I think some of those streets won't need to be collectors. They could be local streets and have enough capacity to serve that demand. So we're just trying to kind of get ahead of that issue because I see it coming up as after the plans is implemented and development applications start coming in.
And I only ask it because I know the residents will probably start complaining that, well, I have to go all the way around here, all the way around here to get in there because I can't turn left there to go into my street.
That could definitely be the case, yeah. So, and I guess one last point, I think earlier iterations of the concept plan zoning configuration had R2, the higher density residential, down to the southern boundary. And in response to some neighbor concerns just outside the plan area, that's now R5 or lower density, and the R2 kind of moved north. So that kind of further decreases the land use intensity there at the very far south end. So I just wanted to raise that issue and just kind of ask for some flexibility as the plan moves toward adoption. Happy to answer any other questions if there are any.
Any other questions from
That
Mr.
was
Mobley?
my only concern.
No?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have two more cards if you'd both like to come up, Christine Kozinski and Elizabeth Grazer-Lindsay. And please do try to hold your comments to 3 minutes.
I have. Oh, more reading.
Is this different than what we've already been given? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Christine Kaczynski. I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. In March of this year, Oregon City, along with all other cities in Clackamas County, met to do the 5-year upgrade in Clackamas County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. After meeting with the county, Oregon City then began their 5-year upgrade for their addendum, which allowed them to receive FEMA funding for disaster. I am here tonight to tell you that the requirements of the Oregon City addendum to the Clackamas County Hazard Mitigation Plan will not allow Oregon City to use or to have Holly Lane in its TSP, because the city is to protect life and property, because the city must incorporate natural hazards into its comprehensive plan, and because the city states it will implement and use the mitigation plan to help the city's comprehensive land use plan to meet state land use planning goal 7, which is designed to protect life and property from natural disasters and hazards through planning strategies that restrict development in areas of known hazards. The city must immediately withdraw Holly Lane, both the north and south extensions, from its TSP. It must further remove the hazardous landslide areas of Thayer Road and from Maple Lane. The city must also change the trip counts coming out of the development located at the old bus barn so that they will not be automatically directed to use Holly Lane. There shall be no actions from the city that make or create Holly Lane as a thoroughfare. The FEMA Hazard Mitigation Plan tells the city it must protect the people and property in hazardous areas, as is directed in the terms of statewide land use planning goal 7. If the city does not take all of Holly Lane, as well as parts of Thayer and Maple Lane, out of its TSP, then it risks losing its certification from FEMA. So I'm here to tell you that no, Oregon City will not come and take Holly Lane. It will not take the people's property. It will not send them to the poorhouse. Oregon City is to abide by all terms of the FEMA National or Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan and all statewide land use planning goals, especially that of Goal 7. The city must support the Oregon City Addendum to the Clackamas County Multi-Jurisdictional Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan in its entirety. The Oregon City Plan is 60 pages long and is on your website. The Clackamas County Multi-Jurisdictional Plan is 120 pages long and is found on the internet. I've given you a copy of the requirements of Goal 7, and I'm turning in some federal regulations, which I didn't have time to copy off. I'll turn this into the city so that they can run it off for you. But this goes along with the hazard regulations. Thank you.
Just something new,
We add it to the record.
Just something new, Christina, that we haven't looked at before? That's
It's not new. Oregon City was first received its certification from FEMA in 2009. The update this year from Clackamas County was huge and went into areas that never, were gone into in the past. It took Clackamas County a long, long time to do this. It all started at the state level. The state has to be certified in order to get FEMA funding in a disaster when the governor, claims one. So these actually come from the federal government down to the state government, down to the county, and down to the city from there. So I know that Clackamas County worked on this for a long time because the changes were very wide-ranging.
Well, what I was asking is, good information, does this go back to FEMA to know that Oregon City is not abiding by this kind of information that you're presenting us here, or is this something you're telling the city?
I suppose only if somebody lets them know that. You know, I did call ODOT and I explained to ODOT that Holly Lane could not be used. And,
Is it considered an evacuation route, is what I was wondering?
Pardon me?
Is Holly Lane considered an evacuation route, or just, FEMA and
FEMA says that statewide Goal 7 rules, and it says that a local government must protect people and their property in hazardous areas. Holly Lane is a very hazardous area. And in the city's comprehensive plan, it's very clear that heavy traffic cuts into the road, and development widening the road could cause those landslides to reactivate, and the people have no landslide insurance. So who's going to pay for the casualty? I mean, the people are already going to lose a lot of money in their land. Their properties are going to go down probably by 50% if it gets hit with all this traffic. Nobody wants to buy a home with that kind of traffic coming within 12 inches of their living room window. They're just not. The people are going to take the loss on this. And FEMA says, no, you cannot do that. You must protect these people who are in a vulnerable, hazardous area. It's not their fault that this happened, which is true. 90% of the people on Holly Lane have no idea they're living in a landslide zone unless they get hit by one, and then they find out, ooh, gee, I'm responsible for all of these losses. I can't pay it. And so they go to bankruptcy, they get foreclosed. The people are the losers in all of this.
So
and the government sought to protect the people.
What I was trying to ask is you're telling the city this, but does anybody tell FEMA that the city's not in line with what they're asking?
No, I'm just trying to tell you what's happened. I've been actually kind of watching this for the last few months. I knew it was coming. So I read the Clackamas County one, and then I read the Oregon City one as it came out. And I realized that it does support the fact that Holly Lane is hazardous and should not be used for heavy transportation.
A lot of research, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Gracer Lindsay. I also live in unincorporated Clackamas County. Currently, there's a continuous stream of traffic on Beavercreek Road at most of the day. And a lot of it's through traffic, whether it's coming from outside of Oregon City or it's people in Oregon City that are traveling through Oregon City. And so when we are looking at having tens of thousands of new vehicle trips every day, it's only right to protect the capacity and the experience of these people of the road actually functioning for them and them able to get through here. The city's code shows that major arterials are supposed to be 5-lane. The only reason that there was any thought of it being 3-lane when the concept plan was being drawn up is that there was some discussion at that time of this development being quite green. That discussion's pretty much gone away, but the thought was that no one would be driving and everyone would be walking and bicycling, so that you wouldn't need to be able to accommodate a lot of traffic. And for that reason, the 3-lane got in there. But when we see that these people will actually be driving, we don't want to have the road just really clogging up. So I believe that the city should be making sure its system development charges are high enough that they can pay for the cost of the road being at the level that it can actually function. And I also think that the roundabouts, they're well known to slow traffic down, which might be fine in some contexts, but when you have a large amount of through traffic, it doesn't make sense to be slowing the traffic down. People are already pretty upset about how it slows down at the high school and want to get that fixed, so they really don't want to see more slowing down happening. As you heard tonight, there's some safety problems for pedestrians and cyclists with the roundabout since they have to cross over the traffic. But there's also the disadvantage that pedestrians don't like to have to walk farther than they need to, but the roundabout makes the distance they have to walk farther. Anyway, those are the comments I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Are there any other public comments? I have no other cards, but is there anybody else wishing to comment? Okay. Seeing none, Christina, back to you for discussion.
Yeah, I'm going to do one more slide just to give you some context.
Okay.
We have some future meetings coming up, and I will provide some staff responses to the comments I received this evening. So those will be incorporated at the next meeting that you can review, particularly related to collectors and geologic hazards on Holly Lane. I'll provide some response back on those two items. We are here at November 25th. December 16th is your Planning Commission meeting for the month of December. I think our goal on the December 6th meeting is to kind of go over kind of the items that haven't been resolved yet. Those include parks, acquisition numbers. I'm still working with the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. I hope to have more direction by December. I'll know more in a couple of weeks. There's some upland habitat comments related for the Natural Resource Committee that I want to share at that meeting, as well as finalize the Home Occupation Cottage Industry Code. At that meeting, if there is some clear direction to give to staff, that would be helpful on all the topics, or most of the topics, because in January, I hope to come back with the full package and findings and the full draft recommendations to allow the Planning Commission to put together and discuss and agree on the packet of recommendations to the City Commission. And these meeting dates are always subject to change, but that's kind of the targets I'm looking for next steps.
Question.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
Are we not seeing Gardner Middle School on December 16th?
You have a quite busy schedule on December 16th. You'll be seeing Christina, you'll be seeing Gardner Middle School, and you'll also be seeing the continuance of the Milner Pet Hospital. So you'll have the 3 items on the 16th.
That's not practical. That ain't going to happen. I mean, I don't think, I mean, I haven't been up here that long, but I mean, the narrative on the Gardner Middle School is 109 pages. We're being asked for quite a few variances in there. I haven't seen a staff report. That's not out yet, I understand, but.
What I would recommend doing, we've already noticed Gardner Middle School, and the Milner vet has already been continued to the 16th. So if you wanted to have just 2 items instead of the 3, then I would recommend continuing this one, not to the 16th, but to January. So push this item.
That's why I brought it up, because I think we're going to push it that night. You know, if we don't do it ahead of time, I think it's just going to happen.
I don't think anybody wants a recommendation to continue at 9:45 at night, so I totally support moving it to January 13th.
Move it to January.
Thank you.
Okay.
So is that third image supposed to be industrial with a smokestack?
Sure.
I'm kidding. I saw that and I'm going, oh, look. It's a
You know, you find the icons that kind of make sense. I don't draw the icons. So I'm going to go back to this page to kind of provide some direction for conversation. So I don't need any direction this evening, but if there is consensus on any of these 3 topics, it would be nice for staff just because I can note it and for the matrix.
Would it be helpful to go back to the slide that has the 4, I think there were 4 topics that you discussed with the City Commission?
Yeah. Here. As it relates to, so we want to do topic 1, Beavercreek Road design.
Where are you wanting here to go?
So there's actually 2 slides, and these are the
right
4
there.
questions.
Right there.
Okay.
Because you're looking for some sort of consensus from us, whether we
So basically on
kind
those
of
3
feel the
questions,
same way.
1, do you concur with the City Commission's initial direction? And if not, what would the Planning Commission's recommendation be? The second one, staff's related to the transportation analysis for the rezone. I don't have any request for comment, but if you have any comment at that time. And the third one is the speed. So for the item number 1, these are the 4 questions we asked
Okay.
the city commission.
Thoughts or comments on that first one there? How many lanes?
5.
Number,
Lanes? 3 or 5?
3 or 5? Well, I think there's 3 in part of it and 5 in the other part. There's a transition somewhere.
That would be your recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 3 further out, but when you get into all that traffic in
Yeah,
there.
the dense area.
Where the transition would take place.
Yeah.
They're saying Meyer Road, and, you know, I don't have enough information to say that some other road is better, but I think it should be a transition.
I agree with 5 through the concept
Yes.
plan. My only concern when I see 3 lanes at Myers Road is exactly how and where you do that. Because by coincidence, at the other end of Myers Road, at 213, southbound at night, that is a nightmare because you've got a signaled intersection and people also trying to reduce go from 5 to 3.
There's a merge.
Now, we already proved that didn't work. I just don't want to see us design
It
the
would probably be a
same
drop
thing.
right turn lane. most
again.
likely.
It is.
Yeah, because
It's a
that right
drop
lane,
turn
people try to get around everybody in the center lane,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it's
here-
a mess.
Let me, my goal is to get all your comments.
Okay, so that's just what I'm
concerned
concerned about. And what might be different, and this might be a question for Mr. Replinger, or
Mhm.
it's possible that there will be more right turn onto Myers Road from Beaver Creek than there is right turn onto the other part of Myers from 213.
So,
Maybe, I don't know. And if there is if most of the traffic's going to be right turn and it really does drop out, there's a lot of dropout at Myers Road and Beaver Creek, then maybe that's a great place to have that transition. I'm just concerned that we're going to have the same issues again
Yeah.
that we have over on Malala.
So-
or
Mike, do you think
213.
there'll be?
For my
Mike-
notes, can you say that again? The Malala?
The Malala Myers intersection,
Where they,
presently,
where they go from 2 to,
where it drops from 5 lanes to
yeah,
3,
Mhm.
right at, or essentially at,
Myers
right
Lane.
after the stoplight,
Mhm.
doesn't work. So how can we make this transition
well, this is a
not have
lot.
the same issues as the one we already did
You're
that does
talking,
have the issues?
when the lane numbers reduce, they need to, you're concerned that they get reduced in the appropriate place so it doesn't back up
right,
traffic.
'cause
Yes.
that's a mess up there.
Yes, and does it have to be some distance after Myers? Just like the alternative mobility standard is going to have that yield runoff lane. Maybe we need a longer yield runoff lane. That's my only concern.
Is it?
But basically, we agree with 5 lanes as much as we can afford it, right?
Right. I want to add
Is
something to
the Myers Road, the link between Beaver Creek and 213? Or is there a fear?
That's what they're building now.
Is your concern that we could be creating a bottleneck on that road? Because if you're feeding it with 5 lanes at Beaver Creek.
I'm not
He's
worried
not
about
concerned
Myers
about Myers,
Road.
yeah.
I'm worried about people backing up
Yeah.
on Beaver
Beaver
Creek
Creek.
the same way they back up on 213,
Exactly.
where it drops from 5 to 3.
Well, but if we have a roundabout, I'm not, if there's a roundabout there shouldn't be a backup. It should be a pretty smooth.
But if you're narrowing the roads down, it's still going to be a backup. Because if you're sitting up there on 213, people come on the right lane trying to get in there, and it really upsets everybody who.
You could create a bottleneck someplace along on Myers Road if you've got major lanes going there and they can turn and go to 213 and there's issues getting on there, then there's a bottleneck.
There's no plans for residential off the Myers Road extension, is there? Isn't that kind of going around the college?
Yeah, that's all campus industrial.
So we probably
Yeah,
wouldn't
that's
have any
industrial.
major problem up there because of residential, probably more on the right off 213 than right off. Beaver.
Christina, can you bring that up?
You know what I mean? If they're not going to any residents.
I'm sorry to ask.
But it's industrial land. That's where the Beaver Creek industrial lands are, on the other side than Myers Road Extension.
On the other side, okay, I'm thinking of going behind the college.
Myers Road is the one up by the college, right?
That is Myers Road.
Okay, the one going to the northeast, that is, this guy right here.
Yeah,
So this is
What are you
Claremont,
northeast on 213?
Loader.
What is in here? The major intersection where they're proposing going to 3 lanes. Where are people going there? Is that where most of the traffic is going, or are most people going to be going home down here? So how much traffic is going to continue through compared to how much is peeling off at Myers?
So I can add that,
Right.
and that sounds like one
Right.
of those questions I can get back to you on, because I don't have that answer.
Because the problem with 213 in Myers is the bulk of traffic going home to Malala continues on. Right. And that's the horrible part of that intersection, where who's going down there to people who live in rural Beaver Creek, which isn't quite as bad as the number of people going to, Malala and 213.
Yeah.
I know the intersection well, that's where I turn.
So, what I'm hearing, I can get some more information
They're still
from
going, yeah.
our development services and our public works department and Dana Webb, our city engineer, about their thoughts on ensuring a good transition and what they're thinking about. I can respond back on that. The discussion about the trip distribution of where the trips are going, I'd have to take a look, and I can include that in my response to staff for the next meeting.
Okay, but we basically have agreement that we agree with 5 lanes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a good transition.
A good transition.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Traffic signals or roundabouts?
Signals.
What do we want to recommend?
Signals for safety for pedestrians.
But the city commission already threw the roundabouts under the bus for Beaver Creek, so we should.
We have an opportunity to put
Force
our
it.
oar in the water and let them know that we prefer roundabouts if we do. That's why we're having the
I'm
discussion.
about signals because of safety.
I do want to acknowledge that we didn't give you the same presentation that we gave the city commission.
Right.
And we did give them aerial images of what the difference is with a 5-lane roundabout, which is extremely impactful to some of those neighboring properties. So I want to acknowledge that this is a iterative process, but we're trying to make sure that everyone's along in the same direction. So we do have the direction from City Commission. It's good to have your input too, but we didn't give you the full presentation that we gave them.
Though it is available.
So
as a-
roundabout would take up some properties of people that lived there already, where you can't move the road over here to put the roundabout in, is what you said by the aerials.
I agree with
It's
Commissioner
incredibly
Kyle that traffic
impactful.
signals make more sense.
Safety
Well, you
for
see
people.
you see the
Because
cost
5 lanes
difference too.
is huge. A 5-lane
Yeah.
roundabout is huge.
I've been on
It's an
one in
extra
Borland, as I
14
said, down there and do all of it.
Traffic signals.
Kind of a-
Signals, okay.
I
Looks
like
like
it,
we
but it's a
have
mess.
Okay.
It's all your fault.
basically a consensus on signals. Next.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, should the city renegotiate with ODOT to remove the Holly Lane connection from our TSP?
I
I'm going to say no.
say no. The Holly Lane thing is probably in a big delay, and if we change that now, we have to go back through on alternate mobility on stuff, and it just creates a lot of extra hassle.
Yeah, I'll go along with that.
Go ahead.
I've been listening for 7 years to Christine. I understand all this. If what I said is true about Frank, Commissioner Frank, having said that we're taking it out of the picture for now, Holly Lane, then I would go ahead with no, because I know it would cost the city a lot more money. But as long as Frank and the other commissioners agree that we leave Holly Lane alone for a while because of all these safety concerns that Christina points out, Christine, excuse me, not Christine, you're Christina, then I will go along with no too.
Now, on the
Until next year.
The last question
Okay.
is a little bit more directed for the city commission, just
Yeah.
because it's related to capital improvement projects and looking at funding, and would we need to bond, or, fiscal ways of looking at it. But, as a planning commission, whatever the adopted design is, that's what development will need to build.
I'm for capital improvement.
Right. Yeah,
Do it
I
as
think
one.
it's pretty safe that we're all going to say we'd love to have the capital project if we can
Sure.
squeeze together two
Yeah.
dimes to make
I
it
just
happen.
remember what they did on Sunnyside when they only did part of it, and then
Right.
everybody was cramped up, and then they decided to improve it, and then they made it worse for people.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else do you need from us?
Do you have any additional questions for staff as it relates to the transportation analysis that I can do homework on if you need? And then lastly, speed zones within the concept plans. So there's reducing residential streets to 20 miles per hour as part of this adoption process. It may not be the formal ordinance. You may have to do subsequent ordinances when actual development happens, but it's the parent ordinance that supports.
Well, I said my piece
Yep,
on
you
that
said
one.
and I agree with that. I think the trend is going from whatever speed you have to 5 miles slower. And this concept with Senate Bill 558, I think, simplifies that whole process. You don't have to do a lot of other studies to get your support from whoever has the final authority on it.
Thoughts?
I'm waiting for him.
No.
I may be an older man, but I still believe in higher speed, so I'm more of 25 to 30. But unless you're really into small residential where there's kids, but I keep thinking about it depends on where the road is leading. If it is all homes with families and kids, yeah, I can see 20, but still I'm 25 to 30.
Well, we were not,
Just me.
we weren't talking about, we were talking about collectors, or which ones we were talking about?
That's what I was
No,
saying.
we're-
Oh, I think these
We're
are all
talking about
residential
streets.
local streets.
Yeah, they should be as low as
Because
possible.
I have a feeling some people won't be happy till it's 10 or 15. People keep wanting to lower it and lower it and lower it. and I
This would
never
also
get
Yeah, you wouldn't want Holcomb to
could
be
include
20, but
residential collectors.
Neighborhoods?
you see.
Yeah.
See, and residential collectors, I think, should be higher.
That's going to get confusing. So it's kind of, it sounds like it's a split decision, but it's a little more toward pushing for 20.
Well, I can bring it back. We don't have our whole commission tonight.
It sounds like
So,
everybody here wants us lower. You all
I'm
slow
kinda
down.
We can bring it
Hearing-
back. We're missing 2 players tonight.
So what I can do is I can
They're gonna say the same
incorporate it
thing
into
as
the
you.
findings of them as the hearing moves forward and we have the full commission. We can have kind of a further discussion, but I'll build it into the findings right now.
And that will, the tentative that we have made tonight will be what gets fed to the city commission at their
Well,
next
this will be the
update.
tentative is what you see in the draft recommendations, and then you have to determine what your final draft recommendations will be. So I'll just feed it into the
On the
initial
right
draft.
road. On the right road, not in the neighborhoods.
Okay.
All right, so I will see you in the new year.
I have just
You're
one
taking
more,
off, going on vacation, or?
one more
I'm
thing.
not coming back in December.
We talked, I brought up at a previous meeting, and I don't know when the right time is to bring this up. This may be too premature, but the physical separation between sidewalks and especially bike lanes and the street section. And I think kind of what I'm talking about is a different street section than what we normally build to be used in this concept plan area that provides some sort of a physical barrier between the traffic lane and the
So
bike
you're gonna
lane.
have a grade separated bike lane?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know when is the right time to suggest that to the city commission. And I don't know if everybody else agrees with me.
Well, if
I
you're gonna
just,
Well, I love those.
What? If you're gonna do that, give me a motorcycle lane too.
It goes along with safety, right? That's the primary reason probably for doing it.
exactly.
Yeah, so,
And usage. The studies show that that when there's a physical separation, people are much more likely to bike than if all they've got is a paint stripe protecting.
I don't mean to be facetious, but do people actually bike here in Oregon City that much? I mean, with all the hills and everything
No.
and the weather?
No, but hopefully they might have the opportunity to do it within this concept plan. That's the whole point of the concept plan, is there's employment opportunities, there's shopping opportunities, and there's living opportunities. And I think the marketing appeal, I think the whole appeal of this area is going to be that I can do that if I want. Nobody's going to drive over to Fred Meyer, ride their bike over to Fred Meyer,
That's all
with their
good.
groceries and cross 213. No, but within the concept plan.
Within it, maybe,
Right.
yeah.
I can do additional research and talk to our public works and provide more feedback on that option and what they were already, what they have been thinking about and what they would need to do for next steps on that.
Is that a
Like
BSP
And-
bicycle?
While we're talking Beavercreek Road concept plan implementation, Christina, did you want any other comments regarding any other topic that we didn't talk about tonight? I know Chair Mitchell had identified a concern for us to look, like we were looking at commercial trucks, to also think about commercial trailers and how do they fit into the home occupation.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that something we should keep?
well, I was going to come back with home occupation, making sure that in the revised version we review at the next Beavercreek Road meeting, both understanding that a lot of people who utilize the home occupation cottage industry code may have larger commercial trailers, not just trucks, so make sure we define that, as well as what Elizabeth brought up when I talked to her at the end of the meeting, which is we talk a lot about retail as relates to service, conjunction of service, but we don't want to forget that we want people to make things in the Beavercreek Road cottage industry, and you should be able to sell what you make. So if you make a widget in your home occupation, you should be able to sell your widget on site. So that's one thing we're going to take a look at and how that might be incorporated into the draft home occupation code, because I would hate to be in a place where our whole goal of this concept plan is to allow people to have businesses and they can't sell what they make in this area. So I will be looking at those additional code amendments when we come back.
Anything else before we move on?
Nope.
Okay, so the public record stays open on that item. And we will move on to item number 4A, general business, which is the Planning Commission yearly update to the City Commission, which will be on December 18th. You all got a copy of a recap of our 2019 agenda items. So I'll hit the high spots on that. I did some highlighting on that. Also hit the high spots and let them know what we've been working on in 2019. What I'd like to know from my fellow commissioners is what you would like to see me tell the City Commission we plan to do in 2020, other than deal with the topics that are brought before us. Anything as far as goals.
We do have-
Said the goals was more of what we accomplished, or was it, we also said the goals when Denise and everyone would give that presentation? Were we saying the goals for the next year?
So there's a couple different things going on. Generally, if there were the Planning Commission did goals for a while, then they didn't do goals for a long while, and then they started doing goals again. We tentatively have scheduled in January to talk about if there are goals, if there's work sessions that you want us to schedule when you don't have hearings, or things that you're looking at doing. We'll want to make sure that when we create this list, if we're looking at priorities or workload, that fits with everything. And then also that our other goals implement the City Commission goals as a whole as well. The yearly update to the City Commission is just how we've been doing, all the great stuff that we've accomplished. If there's one thing that we're focused on doing, I think in 2020, it is the comprehensive plan. So you don't have enough information because I haven't told you enough about it yet, because we just have been receiving grants or working out the scope of work. But you will know more in January, certainly.
So I would think that the most of what we've done is go through all those codes that went before the city, and now going through Beavercreek for half a year, it seems.
Yeah, you guys have been incredibly busy with
A lot of it is
complicated,
listening.
hard projects.
I mean, there's been some small things, annexation, small things, but mainly it's a lot of listening to all the code changes as well as the Beavercreek concept plan stuff.
I would say last year was one of the hardest years to probably be a planning commissioner because there was so much stuff that was happening. And this year is not as bad as last year, but is way harder than a lot of previous years because, again, there are these legislative files and some technical things too. And yes, there's a lot of discretion in the items that you've been reviewing.
So do we set goals for next year other than listening more?
Well, if you guys-
Finalizing the Beavercreek
That's what I'm asking. Do we have goals other than?
to get through the year. Listen
Well,
to Christina.
okay.
I mean,
I'll bring something up, and maybe this will start the process. Parking minimums and maximums.
Oh, yeah.
Should we have a work session and look at that? Are they right? Should we have them? And the reason I bring that up is I can recall at least 3 instances in the last 10 and a half months where we were asked to go outside our parking maximums. That kind of tells me that maybe they're not right.
I could tell you, though, I have 0 staff capacity for that, particularly this year when we're doing the comprehensive
So
plan.
we'll just do it.
So the comprehensive plan update is going to be able, you have the funding to do it?
Yes, we got one. Yes. And it is going to be all hands on deck, and we'll expect a lot of you guys and of staff and out there counting pavement to get public input on our, we'll start with the community vision, and then we'll take that vision, and that will be the driving force for the implementation of the comp.
Okay, well, with that information, then I won't even try to bring anything else.
So, but if you guys want to have a work session to know more about something like this past year we did landslides or natural resource. I mean, if there's some topic that we want to know more about, transportation, we'll do our land use 101 at the beginning of every year like we do. But if you want to have a joint work session with another committee or something like that, please let us know. I would just say rest up while you can in the rest of 2019 because 2020 is going to be a doozy.
Beavercreek is almost done, the concept plan, right? Your plan is to have us in
For you,
January.
yes.
Right, for us
It'll be
guys.
taken to the city commission and adopted later in the spring.
Right, so
Yeah.
beyond the Beavercreek concept plan, then we have the comprehensive plan,
The comp plan is going to take a
plus a
lot of
few
time.
annexations here and there. But from what I gathered from the other night, the city is considering whether they want to go forward with annexations until things are decided. Did I hear that?
The city commission would like to create a policy that we'll come back and talk more about.
So I said, so it's still in
But-
consideration.
That's for non-emergency annexations, so non-sewer or septic related annexations. But again, we have 0 control about what applications come in when.
Right.
And so,
Okay, so obviously the comprehensive plan is big, number 1. I'm looking at the last goals from the previous planning commission. And there is one thing on here that I'll mention, which is continuing work sessions with other boards and committees, like once a year thing. Transportation Advisory Committee, Natural Resources. I think that it's important to continue those. So I'll mention that we want to continue those. And then the other thing would be, and Laura mentioned it, education. Is there a topic where we feel we need additional training or education, or topics? You found yourself in a spot where I don't know, I don't have enough info here. So
Yeah, I found them spots but can I put a finger on it of which spots are going to cause us problem in the next year if we don't get brushed up on it?
right.
It's a good idea to, I don't know if we can just budget some time on it and says, we're going to have
This one-
an
Did we forget
education
the
and
number
we'll
3, 4,
figure out
5?
what topics
Really?
we may be interested at that time. To identify it tonight, I think,
No,
I
right
haven't
here,
been
these
doing much homework for
3.
the last 3 weeks.
Did the city decide on
And
that?
probably won't for December, but I do read the staff reports and that, but I just haven't had the time to spend on that, so.
The training topic that was on the last commission's goal was stormwater standard. Learn more about stormwater standards.
We got a pitch from,
Right.
from
I'm just saying
somebody,
that's.
and that was good.
Okay.
That was
Yeah.
good.
So is there anything else like that you want on another topic?
There was also effective communications. Did we ever really resolve that?
Well, we could try Parks and Rec. You're familiar with that one probably better than any of us. Are there things, parks maintenance and all of that
I don't know that gets into our world much.
Did the city ever decide on lot averaging?
well,
They did.
a lot of, yeah.
For lot averaging, they implemented this planning commission's recommendation, I believe. I can't remember what your recommendation was, but it was instead of 20%, instead of 20% reduction, you can only get a 10% reduction instead of an average.
Yeah.
And you can have basically unlimited number of lots below. They were limited to 25% of the
I
land
think that was
division.
the previous planning commission because it went to the city after us from the year before.
I know, I kind of forget what you
It's so
do
long.
with this
Yeah,
commission.
It's getting,
Oh,
But what's in the new code is a 10% reduction?
Or
allowable on
25% of the lots.
25% of the lots.
Right.
Okay.
but then with master
so
plans
that's-
and all that, you have
so that's-
workarounds to,
That one's
Yeah, but then
done.
it goes back to you in a
What was
year.
that communication?
so
one?
it may not.
Identify, on this, from the previous commission's goal, identify effective communication strategy to the city commission.
Yeah, that's,
A dedicated work session for contribution to the 2019-21 city commission budget and goals. So we're just at the beginning of,
Next, I would say at the end, this time next year, we absolutely should be talking about, so I guess I would highly recommend that at this time next year, you start to identify things that you want to go into the next biennium. So
right.
it's this fall, winter, that you start identifying topics that should be next on if you want to change
for the
tree
next
code
biennium.
or whatever the thing is. And then we can get it funded in the next round.
does the city have a retreat every year or is that every 2 years?
Generally, you have a retreat every year. It's just when.
So I know Mike and I attended that last year to give some advice and listen. I think good communications between the city community and us was important to be there, don't you think?
yeah, I'll mention, I can put that in the
And
report.
we'll do a goals progress update on how we're advancing on city commission goals.
So I'm not hearing a consensus on a training topic.
Well, you want to bring someone in to train us?
What I want, on the 18th, I'm going to go to the city commission with our annual report. I'm going to talk about what we did last year, and I'm going to talk about here's what we're going to do next year. Huge number one capital letters is comprehensive plan. Okay. One of the things that was on the previous planning commission's goal was a training topic that they wanted to learn more about. Is there a training topic that we want to learn more about next year?
I would say,
should tell them we're going to have a training. We're going to learn more about this.
is there more training you can do about the comprehensive plan so we understand it better and what we really need to do for it? Is there somehow we could learn more about what the need is in that comprehensive plan? Or is that just step by step?
Yeah, no, certainly. We want to make sure that you understand what a comp plan is, why we're doing it, and how we're proceeding with it before we move forward with that.
Because we have a lot of new people on this commission that need to understand that.
Mike, does it mention what kind of training? Just
I appreciate that because if
I want you to tell me what kind of training we want.
Well, I think each of us probably needs a different type of training. Some people need more in code. Some people need more training in
More training, but we don't know what it is
communication.
today.
people can
Everybody needs
email
something
me or Chair Mitchell as ideas come up throughout the year also.
I mean, as a
Right.
commission, what are we
Okay.
lacking on?
I won't touch
So again, I want to go back on that. On the comprehensive planning, who would do that? Would that come from someone like you or the city commission kind of give us ideas of what they want in a comp plan? Where does that, the ideas for the comp plan come from? Just by us sitting up here discussing it and all of a sudden, oh, that's good? Or do you have a roadmap?
I have a scope of work and how we will get to a comprehensive plan. We'll do a work session on what that whole process looks like and what a comp plan is and all that before you dive into the details. But essentially, our project is going to include two main phases. Phase 1 is a community vision. So what should Oregon City be like in the next 20 years? What are things that we value? How do you take competing goals and balance them? What things can we do to better support all of our citizens? The answers to that I'm sure you'll have ideas, but they're not going to come from you. They're going to come from the community. The whole point of this comp plan is that we're really going out to the community in a much different way than we ever have before. We're making very strategic efforts to make sure that we're engaging people who don't normally come to these meetings or watch them on cable TV. Our goal is to go out to as many or all the community members if we can. And so to do that, you'll do lots of different things to get feedback. We'll get all this.
Who guides that?
Huh?
Who guides that, reaching out to the community?
We do.
You, the planning department, because I don't see much coming from the communications director for out there to the community in the newspaper or otherwise.
Okay. This is a group effort though, right?
Yeah.
So we will produce tools in which you are going to be expected to go out to community members and even train other community members to go out to other community members.
Attend neighborhood
to get
association
tools.
meetings and talk it up.
Oh yeah. And we
things
go,
like that.
Right. So this is going to be a group effort. It will not just be us knocking us. I mean, the planning department is 4 people and then me. And so we want more than that.
Well, that sounds like a training itself of how to go out and get that information that we need. And that's going to take some good training to do.
Right. There is training sessions in the scope of work. So you guys will be expected to attend a training session to learn how to utilize tools that are created for us from consultants that we don't even have yet. So the point of this is that we will empower you to solicit feedback for how Oregon City will grow from as many people as you can. And we will give you many different tools to do that. And that you will go out there and solicit feedback. And then hopefully you'll find someone who's interested and they will go and pass some flyers or surveys or whatever the thing is to their neighbors. We'll have ideally chalkboards or some other things downtown so people can just answer random questions as they walk by. We will have surveys all over. I mean, we will have lots of tools and methods to solicit feedback, but none of us are going to come back up with all of this plan. It's going to be from the community. It's up to us to work together.
With charrettes and all that stuff and meetings with the public.
I'll tell you more about it when we get there.
Okay. That sounds like good training right there.
Okay, I think I have enough information for the commission.
And we will support you, whatever you say.
Thank you.
As long as it's reasonable, right?
You can sit. I'm not going to say that.
Communications.
All right. I don't need to talk any more than I have, except for to say, month of December, there is only one meeting. It is on December 16th, which is a special meeting date, and then we'll get back to normal in January.
We're not going to have a Christmas party.
Okay, that was it?
That's it. Thank you.
As soon as Commissioner Guile gives me back the gavel, I'll end the meeting.
I thought
Meeting's adjourned.
I thought that was